Welcome back to Say Mojo Homestead. So it is evening and I realized that we don't have bread for tomorrow for lunches. So I'm going to make just kind of a quick basic bread, and I wanted to bring you guys along because I love this way of baking bread, especially if like it's late and I don't have a lot of time. It's basically a method where you weigh your flour, and then there are ratios that you can use that tell you how much yeast and salt to use or sugar. I will say that I have done this recipe with just flour, water, and yeast, and it works great. I am adding a little bit of sugar this time because I want to have that yeast work faster. Yeast dies after you open it and use it. I want to add some sugar in it because sugar feeds yeast. The other reason why I want to add a little sugar is because I haven't done it in this recipe yet. I've done salt. So I've done a recipe, I've made some bread where I just did the flour, the salt, the yeast, and the water. And I liked the way it turned out, but now I want to try it with sugar. If you don't have a scale, I don't know that you can do this bread. You can, it would be some more like Googling that you would have to do. Basically, you'd have to say like how many grams are in 5 cups of flour or whatever. It just doesn't, it kind of takes away the easy part of this bread. So if I were you, I would get a kitchen scale for sure. Like baking, hands down, is so much better when you have a scale where you can weigh out your ingredients. The results have been so much more consistent since I've been able to weigh my ingredients. So I would definitely recommend using one. The nice thing about this also is that I don't have to measure. I can just look at how much flour I have or whatever and then make bread based on that. So when I measure my ingredients, I do everything in grams. And the ratio, I'm going to give it, but I can also put it in the comments of this post. Your ratio is 100% flour. So whatever your flour grams are, that's your 100%. And then your water is 60% of that. Salt would be 2%. Yeast is 1%. And sugar is 3%. And like I said, you don't have to use the salt and the sugar. It's optional. But the other reason why I like this is because I have a Pampered Chef loaf pan that I like to use. I like the stoneware, but it's larger than your average loaf pan. It's more for like a meatloaf or whatever. And so if I use a regular bread recipe, it doesn't fill up the whole pan. And so it just doesn't have that beautiful shape. So I've been using this and playing around with these bread making ratios so that I could find a great flour weight to use to really fill up that pan and get a beautiful loaf. So I'm gonna actually kind of cheat and use the flour weight I know works best for that pan. But you can experiment, figure out what you want, what works best for your loaf pan, or maybe you want to make 5 loaves of bread. I mean, if you have a huge family, then you can make 5 loaves of bread and not have to worry about it all week. So you can definitely play around with your ratios. You can literally make as much or as little as you want or you need. I found that the grams that are best for my loaf pan are 545 grams of flour. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that out. I have just a metal bowl on my scale. So I'm at 545 grams of flour, which I said is, like I said, that's perfect for my loaf pan. Now that I've measured out my flour, I'm going to remove the bowl and I'm going to make a well in the middle of my flour. I'm going to see if I can maybe show you guys. I'm just going to make a well in the middle of my flour. And when I measure out my yeast, I'm going to put it right in there, in that well. I'm also gonna put my sugar in that well, and then I'll fill it with the water. Go ahead and measure out my 5 grams of yeast. And the nice thing about this is that I can literally just use a spoon in a bowl and not have a bunch of dishes left over that are dirty, which is, in my opinion, that's like amazing. So I put that now down in my well, my hole, and then I am going to now do sugar. I like to put my sugar in directly with the yeast because the reason why I'm using sugar in this recipe is because I want it to feed my yeast. The ratio calls for 3% of that 100% for our sugar. So I would put in that 545 in my calculator, and then I would multiply that by 3, and I'd put that percent sign, and then I would do equals, and that gives me, rounded off, about 16 grams. So I'm going to use 16 grams of sugar, and I'm going to put it directly in that well with my yeast. So I'm putting that sugar right in that well. And then now I'm going to take my water. You always want to use warm water when you're using it to activate yeast or to feed your yeast. You don't want it to be really hot. It will kill your yeast, but you also cannot be cold or else it won't work. The first thing I need to do though is find out how much water I need. So now I'm going to measure from my mason jar into this other mason jar 327 grams of water. So the reason why I didn't measure that water directly into the bowl is because if I pour too much water, which I actually did, I can't get it out of that flour and I will have ruined or have to go back and add. It's just not worth it. So I always measure things into a separate container and then add it. So I'm pouring this into the well. So it's been a few minutes, so I'm just kind of mixing it in. I've been kneading, and the way I knead is just directly in the bowl, and it's just really I just push down and try to fold it. I've been using flour just to dust my hands with. I haven't had to add any. I'm just using it to dust my hands so that it doesn't stick as much to my hands. And this is good. Like, this is a good consistency for the bread. It is a little tacky, you can see, but it's smooth and it makes a good loaf. So I'm gonna form it into a loaf now. And then I don't really have an official way of doing that. I just kind of fold it and make it look like I want my loaf to look. And then I am going to oil my pan. Take some olive oil. It's it's stoneware, and they say it's supposed to be nonstick, but I always feel better if it's oiled. Now I'm gonna put my loaf in there, and then I'm going to take a serrated knife, however you say it, and I'm gonna do just 3 little slits in the top. And I take a cloth and I cover it, and we have a gas range, so the top actually heats as the oven is heating. So I just let it sit on the stove top to preheat or to rise while the oven's preheating. So you want to let it rise for 20 minutes or until it's doubled in size. So I put our bread in the oven. I did want to also mention that when you bake bread, you need to move your rack to the lowest place that it can go. So it needs to be kind of in that bottom section of your oven. So I'm gonna go ahead and bake this bread, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you for coming and hanging out with me, making some very easy bread. Have a great rest of your week and be blessed.